Captain Alan Fisher stood on the bridge of the raider vessel Bloodfang, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the polished floor. His eyes, sharp and calculating, studied the holographic display floating before him. After weeks of tracking, trade routes at the edges of human territory, they had finally spotted what they were looking for: a lone Earth freighter traveling through the Cygnus corridor. There, Alan pointed at the small blue dot moving slowly across the star map. No escorts, no fleet support, just like always. First Mate Krell moved closer, his scaled skin reflecting the blue light of the hologram. Unlike the human captain, Krell belonged to the Varaxian species, reptilian beings known for their tactical minds and combat prowess. The alliance between humans like Alan, who had turned against their own kind, and the warrior Varaxians, had proven profitable for both. "Perfect target," Krell said, his forked tongue flickering between sharp teeth. "These humans never learn. All other species travel in convoys, but humans, always alone." "Perhaps they cannot afford protection," suggested Mira, their navigation officer. The small, pale alien tapped her 6 fingers against the console rhythmically. Alan shook his head. "No. Earth's military power is substantial. It's almost as if they choose isolation." He magnified the hologram with a gesture of his hand. The ship came into clearer view, a standard Earth freighter, about 200 meters long with the name SS Horizon painted on its hull. "What cargo?" Alan asked. Mira consulted her screens. "Medical supplies according to their flight plan, bound for the colony on Vega Prime." Alan smiled. Medical supplies were always in demand on the black market. "Perfect. Prepare the boarding." Parties. Standard approach. Disable their engines, breach the hull at the cargo bay, and take everything of value. As the crew rushed to follow his orders, Alan remained still, staring at the hologram. Something about human shipping patterns had always bothered him, even when he had served in Earth's fleet years ago. Every species in the galaxy understood the safety of numbers. The Mindurans traveled in groups of at least 5 ships. The Thessian Trade Guild moved in massive convoys. Even the warlike Crotari protected their supply lines with destroyer escorts. Only humans sent their ships out alone, scattered across the stars like seeds in the wind. "It doesn't make strategic sense," he muttered to himself. "Captain?" Krell had returned, battle armor already secured to his muscular frame. "Nothing," Alan said, straightening up. "How long until intercept?" 2 hours at current speed," Alan nodded. "Tell the engine room to give us everything they've got. I want to catch them before they can call for help." As Krell left to relay the orders, Alan took one last look at the holographic freighter. In his years as a raider, he had attacked dozens of human vessels. They were always easy prey, minimal defenses, small crews, rich cargo. This one would be no different. The Bloodfang accelerated, its predatory shape cutting through the darkness of space toward its unsuspecting victim. Aboard the SS Horizon, Captain Susan Miller sat alone in her quarters, reviewing supply manifests on her tablet. At 45, she had spent more than half her life in space, the zero-gravity environment and medical treatments keeping her fit despite the years. Her brown hair was cut short for practicality, and her face, though lined with experience, remained alert and intelligent. A soft chime interrupted her work. "Captain," came the voice of her first officer. "Long-range scanners have detected a vessel, changing course to intercept us. Configuration matches known raider patterns." Susan put down her tablet, but her expression showed no surprise or alarm. "Time to intercept?" "Approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes at their current speed." "Thank you, Frank. Maintain course and speed for now. Alert me when they're 30 minutes out." "Yes, Captain." As the communication ended, Susan stood and walked to the small viewport in her quarters. The stars looked cold and distant from here, unchanging despite the horizon's considerable velocity. She had known this might happen when they plotted a course through the Cygnus corridor. The sector had seen increased raider activity in recent months. Susan opened a secure drawer in her desk and removed a small metal case. Inside lay a hypo-injector and several vials of clear liquid. She selected one, loaded it into the injector, and pressed the device against her neck. There was a brief hiss as the contents entered her bloodstream. She returned the case to its drawer, then tapped her communication badge. "This is Captain Miller to Medical Bay." "Dr. Bennett here," came the prompt reply. "Laura, it seems we have company. Raiders about 100 minutes out. Is everything prepared?" "Yes, Captain. All crew members received their boosters last week. The isolation protocols are standing by." "Good. And the cargo?" "Secure. The special containers will protect the supplies even if the ship is compromised." Susan nodded to herself. "Excellent. Stand by for Protocol Omega." "Understood, Captain." Susan ended the communication and returned to her viewport, watching the stars. In the 20 years since humanity had joined the galactic community, they had learned many hard lessons. The hardest had been the discovery that human biology was unique among known species in ways no one could have predicted. She remembered the first contact disaster that had claimed hundreds of lives, both human and alien, the quarantine that followed, the fear and distrust that had taken years to overcome, and still most species didn't understand. They saw human ships traveling alone as a sign of weakness or pride. They didn't realize it was the only responsible choice. The proximity alarm sounded, drawing Susan from her thoughts. The raiders were approaching faster than expected. She tapped her badge again. "This is Captain Miller to all crew. Protocol Omega is now in effect. I repeat, Protocol Omega is now in effect." Throughout the ship, the 8 crew members of the Horizon exchanged knowing glances. They had trained for this, knew exactly what to do. Protocol Omega wasn't about fighting back or even protecting the cargo. It was about containment. Susan walked briskly to the bridge where Frank Chen, her first officer, waited with the rest of the bridge crew. "Status?" she asked, taking her seat in the captain's chair. "Raider vessel approaching at attack speed. They're hailing us." On screen. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the face of a human man with cold eyes and a scar running down his left cheek. "Earth vessel," he said, his voice flat and professional. "This is Captain Alan Fisher, of the independent ship Bloodfang. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Cooperate and no one needs to get hurt." Susan met his gaze calmly. "Captain Fisher, this is Captain Susan Miller of the SS Horizon. We are a medical transport carrying essential supplies to Vega Prime. I strongly advise you to reconsider your actions." Alan laughed. "I'm counting on those medical supplies, Captain. They'll fetch a high price. Now power down or we'll disable your engines by force." Susan's expression remained unchanged. "As you wish, Captain. But remember, I warned you." She signaled her communications officer to cut the transmission. "All hands," she announced. "Prepare for impact. Secure all stations and move to your designated safe zones." The crew moved with practiced efficiency as the first shots from the Raider ship struck the Horizon's engines. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait. The boarding went easier than Alan Fisher had expected. After disabling the human ship's engines with precision fire, the Bloodfang moved alongside the Horizon, like a predator closing in on wounded prey. The Raiders attached their boarding craft to the hull near the cargo bay, cutting through the metal with thermal lances. "Breach successful," reported Sarka, the raid leader. The female Krotari stood nearly 7 feet tall, her blue skin marked with tribal scars that told the story of her many successful raids. "We're entering now." From the bridge of the Bloodfang, Alan watched through the helmet cameras of his boarding party. 20 raiders, a mix of species united by greed, poured into the human vessel through the smoking hole they had cut. "Remember," Alan said into his comm, "secure the cargo first, then find the crew. I want prisoners, not bodies." "Understood, Captain," Sarka replied. The raiders moved through the dimly lit cargo bay, weapons raised. The large space was filled with sealed containers bearing medical symbols. Sarka signaled to her team to begin checking the containers, while she led a smaller group toward the inner doors. "Strange," she muttered. "No resistance yet." "Their security systems should have activated by now," Krell added, moving beside her. As Alan's first mate, He insisted on leading dangerous missions personally. They reached the inner doors without incident. Sarka placed breach charges on the locking mechanism and the team took cover. The small explosion echoed through the cargo bay, and the doors slid open. The corridor beyond was empty. "Captain," Sarka reported, "something feels wrong. The humans are not defending their ship." On the Bloodfang, Alan frowned. In his experience, human crews always fought back, even when outnumbered. "Proceed with caution. They might be planning an ambush." The raiding party split into 3 teams. Sarka led her group toward the bridge. Krell headed for engineering, and the third team searched for crew quarters. They moved slowly, checking each room and junction for traps. Krell's team was the first to encounter resistance. As they approached, engineering, 2 human security officers opened fire from behind a makeshift barricade. The brief firefight ended quickly, with the humans retreating deeper into the ship, leaving 1 raider wounded. "They're falling back too easily," Krell reported through the comm. "This doesn't feel right." "They're preserving their lives," Alan replied, watching from the Bloodfang. "Smart. Continue the mission." Sarka's team reached the bridge without incident, only to find it empty. Emergency systems ran on automatic, but there was no sign of the bridge crew. "Bridge secured," she reported. "No humans found." The third team reported similar findings in the crew quarters. Personal belongings remained in place, suggesting a hasty evacuation. Where have they gone? Alan wondered aloud. The horizon wasn't large enough to hide an entire crew for long, and the ship's escape pods were still in place according to the external scanners. Check the medical bay and any secure areas. As the raiders continued their search, a young human male was spotted trying to reach an escape pod. Unlike the others, he didn't retreat when discovered. He simply raised his hands in surrender as raiders surrounded him. "Bring him to the cargo bay," Alan ordered. "I want to question him personally." The human offered no resistance as they brought him to the cargo bay where they were gathering their plunder. He was young, perhaps in his mid-20s, with short, brown hair and the lean build of someone used to living in space. His uniform identified him as an engineer. "What's your name?" Sarka demanded, pushing the human to his knees. "Kevin Wright," he replied calmly, "engineering assistant." "Where are the rest of your crew?" she asked, her voice harsh. Kevin stared at the alien, his expression unreadable. "They're where they need to be." Frustrated by his vague answer, Sarka pressed a curved blade against Kevin's throat. "Don't play games with me, human. Where is your captain? Where have they hidden?" "I'm not playing games," Kevin replied, still unnervingly calm despite the blade at his throat. "I'm telling you the truth. They're where they need to be for Protocol Omega." "What is Protocol Omega?" Sarka pressed the blade harder, drawing a thin line of red blood. "It means you still don't understand why we travel alone." At that moment, the ship's internal lighting shifted to a deep red hue. The normal white lights dimmed throughout the vessel, replaced by the crimson emergency system. A soft female voice announced over the ship's speakers, "Attention, containment protocol initiated. Quarantine fields engaged. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." The raiders exchanged confused glances as energy barriers suddenly materialized at all exits from the cargo bay. The shimmering fields of blue energy sealed them inside. "What is happening?" Alan demanded from his ship, watching through the helmet cameras of his boarding party. "Break through those barriers." Sarka ordered her technician to disable the energy fields. The small insect-like alien attached a device to the field generator, attempting to overload it. "We can't, Captain," came the panicked reply as the device sparked and failed. "Our weapons have no effect on these barriers." "Captain, something's wrong with Turok," one of the raiders called out. They turned to see a large reptilian raider leaning against a cargo container, his breathing labored. His scales had taken on a grayish tint. Before anyone could reach him, Turok collapsed to the floor, his body shaking violently. On the bridge of the Bloodfang, Alan watched in growing horror as more of his boarding party began showing signs of distress. One by one, raiders of different species began experiencing similar symptoms: trembling limbs, disorientation, difficulty breathing. "What's happening to them?" he demanded. Get a medical scan. The ship's doctor, an avian being named Ravi, ran a remote diagnostic through the Raiders' suit sensors. Captain, they're all showing signs of some kind of biological contamination. Multiple systems failing, immune responses overloaded. I've never seen anything like it. Back in the cargo bay, Kevin Wright remained kneeling, untouched by whatever was affecting the Raiders. Sarka herself began to feel the first symptoms, a slight trembling in her limbs, followed by disorientation. What have you done? She gasped, releasing her grip on Kevin and staggering backward. Nothing, he replied evenly. Just traveling solo as humans do. In the ship's secure medical bay, Dr. Laura Bennett and Captain Susan Miller monitored the situation through reinforced glass walls. The 7 other crew members of the Horizon stood nearby, watching the screens that showed the cargo bay. They're experiencing the first stage already, Laura noted, checking the biometric readings. Faster than we anticipated. Susan nodded grimly. Send the message to Earth Command. Tell them we have confirmed contact with the Raiders. And prepare the treatment. Protocols. Do you think they'll agree to our terms? Asked Frank Chen, the first officer. They don't have a choice, Susan replied, watching as more Raiders collapsed on the screen. Only Kevin remained standing, protected by the cocktail of immunizations that were standard for all human space travelers. Should I explain it to them? Laura asked quietly. Yes, Susan replied, her face solemn. They deserve to know what's happening to them, and why. Captain Alan Fisher paced the bridge of the Bloodfang, his face pale with worry. On the main screen he could see his boarding party suffering. Half of them were now on the floor of the cargo bay, struggling to breathe. The others wouldn't last much longer. Get me a direct link to the human captain, he ordered, his voice tight with anger and fear. The communication officer worked quickly. A moment later, the screen changed to show the face of Captain Susan Miller. She looked calm, almost sad. What have you done to my crew? Alan demanded. Nothing deliberate, Captain Fisher, Susan replied. They're experiencing the effects of human pathogens, specifically a microorganism we call Proxima strain B. You're using biological warfare? Alan's voice was a mixture of shock and outrage. No, Susan replied firmly. We're carrying medical supplies to the colony on Vega Prime, as I told you. The Proxima strain is just one of 17 potentially lethal pathogens that human bodies naturally harbor. We've evolved alongside them for millennia. They do not harm us, but they are deadly to most other species in the galaxy. Alan stared at the screen in disbelief. That's impossible. A new face appeared beside Susan, an older woman with short gray hair and the insignia of a medical officer. Captain Fisher, I'm Dr. Laura Bennett, Chief Medical Officer of the Horizon. What Captain Miller is telling you is true. Humans are walking biohazards to most galactic species. Our immune systems contain and manage dozens of microorganisms that would devastate your people. That's why we travel alone, not from weakness, but as a containment protocol. On the Raider ship, the medical officer Ravi nodded slowly. It's possible, Captain. Remember the quarantine procedures Earth implemented when they first joined the Galactic Council? Everyone thought they were being paranoid or secretive. They were being cautious, Dr. Bennett continued. When we first made contact with alien species 20 years ago, we had no idea our normal bacterial flora would be so dangerous. The first diplomatic mission ended in disaster when 3 alien ambassadors died after sharing a meal with human representatives. Alan recalled the news stories from his youth. The first contact incident had almost led to war before cooler heads prevailed. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, why doesn't the galaxy know about this? They do, Susan replied. It's in all the official warnings about human space. But most species either don't believe it or think we exaggerate the danger. Raiders like you see our solo ships as easy targets rather than the safety measure they actually are. In the cargo bay of the Horizon, more Raiders collapsed. Only 5 remained standing, including Krell and Sarka, though both were clearly struggling. Your boarding party has been exposed for 30 minutes now, Dr. Bennett said, checking a tablet. Without treatment, they have perhaps another hour before organ failure begins. Can you help them? Alan asked, his anger giving way to desperate concern. Yes, Susan nodded. We have treatments that can save them, but you must agree to our terms." "What terms?" Alan's eyes narrowed. "First, you will surrender your ship and, all weapons. Second, you and your entire crew will be taken into custody and transported to the nearest Earth Alliance outpost to face charges for piracy. And if I refuse," Susan's expression remained calm, "then your boarding party will die, and we will be forced to destroy your ship to prevent you from attacking other human vessels in the future." Alan looked at the screen showing his suffering crew. Sarka had finally collapsed, leaving only Krell and 3 others standing. He couldn't let them die. "I agree to your terms," he said quietly. Susan nodded. "A wise decision. Prepare to be boarded by our security team. They will secure your vessel." As the communication ended, Alan turned to Ravi. "Is what they're saying really possible? Humans carrying deadly diseases?" The avian doctor spread his wings slightly in the equivalent of a shrug. "In theory, yes. Every species evolves with its own microbiome, bacteria and viruses that live in harmony with their hosts. It's not unheard of for one species' normal flora to be deadly to another." "Then why didn't we know about this?" Alan demanded. "Perhaps we should have," Ravi replied. "Earthships always travel alone. They maintain strict quarantine protocols at all spaceports. Their colonies are isolated from other species. The signs were there, but we interpreted them as human xenophobia or pride." In the cargo bay of the Horizon, Kevin Wright watched as a team of humans in sealed medical suits entered through a small door that had opened in the energy barrier. They carried medical equipment and began treating the fallen raiders, injecting them with various substances. Dr. Bennett supervised the treatment from behind the barrier. "Start with broad-spectrum antibiotics and immune suppressants," she instructed, "then the targeted anti-proxima agents." Kevin stood up as one of the medical team approached him. "You did well, right?" the medic said. "Are you feeling any symptoms?" "No," Kevin replied. "The booster shots are working fine." Across the bay, Krell had finally collapsed. As medics rushed to treat him, Kevin walked over to watch. "Will he live?" Kevin asked Dr. Bennett through his comm. "Yes," she replied. "We caught it in time. They'll all survive, though recovery will take weeks." Meanwhile, on the Bloodfang, the human security team from the Horizon had taken control. They wore sealed environmental suits as they moved through the ship, securing weapons and gathering the crew. Alan stood on his bridge watching as his command was taken from him. A human security officer approached. "Captain Fisher, please come with me. We need to check you for possible contamination." "Am I infected too?" Alan asked, suddenly afraid. "Unlikely," the officer replied. "You didn't board our ship, but we need to be sure. The medical team will examine everyone on your crew." As Alan was led away, he passed Ravi, who was deep in conversation with a human doctor. "The implications are enormous," the avian was saying. "If human pathogens are this deadly to other species, what about other aspects of human biology we don't understand?" "That's why we tried to warn everyone," the human doctor replied. "But no one listened. They just saw our solo ships as easy targets." In the medical bay of the Horizon, Captain Susan Miller watched as the raiders were treated. Frank Chen, her first officer, stood beside her. "Do you think they'll spread the word?" Frank asked. "They will," Susan replied. "Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. Once they understand the real reason human ships travel alone, they'll tell others." "And you think that will stop the attacks?" Susan smiled slightly. "Would you attack a ship if you knew it could kill you just by breathing the same air?" Frank shook his head. "I suppose not." "Exactly," Susan said. "Sometimes the best defense isn't weapons or shields, it's simply being too dangerous to touch." From his bed in the quarantine section, Krell watched the humans working to save his crew. Despite his hatred for them, he had to admit their medical skills were impressive. They moved with confidence, unafraid of the pathogens they carried within them. "A race of plague bearers," he muttered to himself. "No wonder they travel alone." A human doctor approached his bed. "You're responding well to the treatment," she said. "Your vital signs are stabilizing." Why help us? Krell asked. We attacked you. The doctor checked his medication drip before answering. Because that's what humans do. We protect others from ourselves, and when that fails, we try to fix the damage. Krell closed his eyes, too weak to argue. For the first time, he began to understand the strange contradiction of humans, deadly by their very nature, yet dedicated to healing and preservation. The truth was spreading through both ships. Human ships traveled solo, not from weakness, but from responsibility. 2 days passed aboard the Horizon. The Raider crew remained in quarantine, receiving constant medical care. Most had stabilized, though they were still weak. 3 had been moved to critical care pods, special medical units designed to support failing organ systems while the body healed. Captain Alan Fisher sat on the edge of his bed in the quarantine area. Unlike his crew, he hadn't been infected, but Earth protocols required him to remain isolated until they reached an Alliance outpost. A guard stood outside his door, visible through a small window. The door slid open and Captain Susan Miller entered. She wore no protective gear, having already been exposed to Alan when they first spoke. "How are your people?" Alan asked immediately. "Recovering," Susan replied, taking a seat across from him. "Dr. Bennett says they'll all survive. Even Sarka and the others in critical care are showing improvement." Alan nodded, relief visible on his face despite his situation. "And what happens to us now?" "We'll reach Outpost 47 in about 18 hours. Alliance authorities will take custody of you and your crew." Susan watched him carefully. "The charges are serious. Piracy, attempted theft, assault." "I understand." Alan's voice was quiet. "We knew the risks when we chose this life." Susan studied him for a moment. "You were Earth Fleet once, weren't you? I recognize some of your tactics." Alan looked up, surprised. "Yes, 8 years ago. How did you know?" "The way you positioned your ship during the attack. Classic Earth Fleet maneuver." Susan leaned forward. "Why did you leave?" Alan was silent for a long moment. "My family was on Collins Colony when the plague hit. Earth quarantined the entire settlement. No ships in or out. 15,000 people died, including my wife and daughter." His voice hardened. "They could have evacuated them, but they chose containment instead." Susan's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your family, but you know why that decision was made. If the plague had spread..." "I know." Alan interrupted. "Millions more would have died. The logical choice. The responsible choice." He laughed without humor. "And now I find out that humans themselves are the plague." "Not exactly," came a new voice. Dr. Laura Bennett had entered the room. "May I join you?" Susan nodded and the doctor took a seat. "What do you mean, not exactly?" Alan asked. Dr. Bennett pulled out a tablet and brought up several images. "Humans aren't a plague. We're simply carriers of microorganisms that evolved with us on Earth. To us, they're either harmless or manageable. To alien physiologies, they're devastating." She showed him microscopic images of various bacteria and viruses. "These are just a few of the pathogens we naturally carry. Our immune systems keep them in check, but other species have no natural defenses against them. Like when European explorers brought smallpox to the Americas," Alan said, remembering his history lessons. "Exactly," Dr. Bennett nodded. "Except on a galactic scale. When humans first joined the interstellar community, we had no idea our normal microbiome would be so dangerous. The first contact incident taught us that lesson the hard way. 3 alien diplomats died," Alan recalled. "And nearly started a war," Susan added. "After that, Earth implemented the Solo Protocol. All human ships must travel alone. All human colonies must maintain strict quarantine procedures. All contact with alien species must follow decontamination guidelines. But if it's so dangerous, why allow human ships to travel at all?" Alan asked. "Because we have too much to offer," Dr. Bennett replied. "Medical knowledge, technological innovations, cultural exchange. Complete isolation wasn't an option, so we found ways to manage the risk. Like the treatments you're giving my crew? Yes, we've developed methods to suppress the effects of human pathogens on alien biology. Temporary solutions, but effective. Dr. Bennett showed him more data on her tablet. And we're working on more permanent solutions, genetic modifications, to make our microbiome less dangerous. Environmental systems that neutralize human pathogens in shared spaces. Susan stood up. That's actually what the cargo on this ship is for. The Vega Prime colony is testing a new atmospheric filtration system that would allow humans and aliens to share the same spaces without risk. Alan looked between them. And yet most species still don't understand the danger. Many don't believe it, Susan sighed. They think it's an exaggeration or a human trick. They see our solo ships as easy targets. Not anymore, Alan said quietly. Not after this. In the main quarantine ward, Krell sat up in his bed, stronger now than the day before. A human nurse checked his vital signs. Your readings are good, she said. The treatment is working well. Krell watched her work. How can you stand it? He asked suddenly. Stand what? The nurse looked puzzled. Knowing what you carry inside you, knowing you could kill with a breath. The nurse's hands stilled for a moment. It's not easy, she admitted. But we manage, we take precautions. We find ways to connect despite the barriers. Across the room, Kevin Wright entered carrying a tray of food containers. He distributed them to the recovering raiders, all specially prepared to meet their diverse biological needs. Mealtime, he announced, reaching Krell's bed. The doctor says you're ready for solid food. Krell accepted the container, opening it to find familiar Varaxian food. You have our food on board? We carry supplies for most major species, Kevin explained. Part of our protocols. In case of accidental exposure, we need to be able to care for alien visitors. Or raiders, Krell added with a hint of irony. Kevin nodded. Or raiders. As he moved away, Sarka called out from her bed. The once intimidating Krotari was pale and weak, but her eyes were alert. Human, come here. Kevin approached cautiously. The last time they had spoken, she had held a blade to his throat. You knew what would happen to us, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Kevin replied simply. You could have warned us more clearly. Kevin met her gaze. Would you have believed me if I told you that just being on a human ship could kill you? Sarka was silent for a moment. No, she finally admitted. I would have thought it was a trick. Everyone does, Kevin said. That's why we travel alone. That's why we maintain quarantine. Not just to protect others from us, but to protect them from their own disbelief. On the bridge, Susan Miller received a communication from Earth Command. The Admiral's face appeared on her screen. Captain Miller, we've received your report. Good work capturing the raider vessel. Thank you, Admiral. We'll deliver them to Outpost 47 as ordered. The Admiral nodded. And the exposure incident? Contained. Dr. Bennett's treatments are working well. All raiders are expected to survive. Good. The Admiral's expression became serious. This incident may have wider implications than we anticipated. Word is spreading through the fringe colonies about what happened. The Galactic Council has requested an emergency session to discuss human containment protocols. What do they want? Susan asked, concerned. Surprisingly, they want less restriction. They're finally beginning to understand why our ships travel solo, and they're afraid. They want better solutions that would allow safer interaction. Susan couldn't hide her surprise. After 20 years of warnings, a group of raiders finally convinced them. Sometimes, the Admiral said with a slight smile, people need to see the danger firsthand before they truly believe in it. After the communication ended, Susan sat quietly, thinking about the Admiral's words. Perhaps this incident, terrible as it was, might lead to positive change. Perhaps humans would not always need to travel alone. 6 months later, a new transport ship called the SS Venture prepared to leave Earth's orbital station. Captain Paul Garcia stood on the bridge, reviewing the final checklist before departure. At 40, Garcia was younger than most ship captains, but his record in Earth fleet had earned him this command. "All systems check out, Captain," reported First Officer Nicole Adams from her station. "We're cleared for departure." Paul nodded. "Thank you, Nicole. Helm, take us out. Standard departure pattern." The Venture detached from the station and moved smoothly away from Earth. As the blue planet grew smaller behind them, Paul studied the navigational display. Their route to the Proxima colony would take them through several busy sectors. "Course laid in," the navigator announced. "ETA to Proxima colony. 8 days, 14 hours. "Very good," Paul said. "Engage long-range scanners. Keep a sharp eye. Out for other vessels." "Yes, Captain." Nicole approached Paul's chair, her voice low. "Still worried about raiders, sir?" After what happened to the Bloodfang, Paul smiled slightly. "Old habits, but no, I'm not particularly concerned. Word has spread quickly." Indeed, the incident involving the Horizon and the Bloodfang had become famous throughout known space. After reaching Outpost 47, the raiders had faced trial for their crimes. But instead of the harsh sentences everyone expected, they received a surprising offer. Join a special educational program. Now, former raiders like Krell and Sarka traveled with Earth representatives, explaining to other species the true reason human ships always traveled solo. Their first-hand accounts were more convincing than any official warning ever had been. The Venture continued on its journey. Unlike traditional human transports, it carried something new: a prototype atmospheric filtration system designed to neutralize human pathogens. If successful, it would allow humans and aliens to interact more safely. 2 days into their journey, the sensors detected a convoy of alien ships ahead. "Captain," called the sensor officer, "I'm picking up 6 vessels at coordinates 2I-27 Mark 34, Minduran trading fleet according to their identification signals." "Acknowledged," Paul replied. "Maintain course. Send the standard warning message." The communications officer transmitted the automated message that all human ships broadcast. "Attention all vessels. This is a human ship. For your safety, please maintain a minimum distance of 5,000 kilometers. This is a biological hazard warning, not a hostile action." On the view screen, they could see the convoy of sleek Minduran ships. The aliens were known for their advanced technology and cautious nature. To everyone's surprise, instead of adjusting course to avoid the Venture, the lead Minduran ship transmitted a response. "Human vessel. This is Fleet Commander Zareth of the Minduran Trade Guild. We request permission to approach and escort you through this sector." Paul exchanged surprised glances with Nicole. This was unprecedented. "Minduran vessel, this is Captain's." "Paul Garcia, we appreciate your offer, but proximity to our ship poses biological risks to your crew." "We are aware of the risks, Captain Garcia," came the reply. "Our ships have been equipped with isolation systems based on Earth designs. We wish to test their effectiveness under controlled conditions." Paul considered the request carefully. "Stand by, Commander Zareth." He turned to Nicole. "Get Dr. Wilson up here." Minutes later, Dr. Ben Wilson, the ship's chief medical officer, arrived on the bridge. Paul explained the situation. "Is this possible?" he asked. "Could they have developed effective isolation systems so quickly?" Dr. Wilson stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Mindurans are very advanced in environmental engineering. It's possible, but I'd want to review their systems before approving any close approach." Paul nodded. "Make it happen." Over the next several hours, the Minduran and human teams exchanged technical data. Dr. Wilson and his staff analyzed the alien designs while the Minduran studied the prototypes aboard the Venture. "Their system is impressive," Dr. Wilson finally reported. "Different approach than ours, but potentially effective. I believe a controlled test would be safe, with proper precautions." Paul made his decision. "Commander Zareth, we agree to your escort proposal with certain conditions. We'll maintain a distance of 1,000 kilometers, and both ships will conduct constant monitoring for any sign of contamination." "Agreed, Captain Garcia," the Minduran replied. "We are honored by your trust." As the venture continued toward Proxima Colony, the Minduran ships formed a loose escort formation around it, maintaining the agreed distance. The crew watched in wonder. For most, it was the first time they had traveled in company with alien vessels. "It's strange," Nicole commented, as she stood with Paul watching the view screen. "All my career, I've been trained that human ships must travel solo for the safety of others. And now we're finding a new way," Paul finished for her. "Not perfect yet, but a start." The journey continued without incident. The Minduran isolation systems performed well, showing no signs of contamination. By the time they reached the outskirts of the Proxima system, both crews had exchanged extensive data and even held several virtual conferences. As they prepared to part ways, Commander Zareth transmitted a final message. "Captain Garcia, our journey together has been both educational and historic. The Minduran Trade Guild will be sharing our findings with the Galactic Council. Perhaps soon, human ships will no longer need to travel solo." Paul smiled. "I hope you're right, Commander. Safe travels." The Minduran ships peeled away, heading toward their own destination. The venture continued alone to Proxima Colony, where the new filtration system would be installed and tested. In his quarters that evening, Paul recorded his log entry. Captain's log, stardate 22874. Today marked what may be a turning point in human-alien relations. For the first time since the Solo Protocol was implemented, a human ship traveled with alien escorts. The success of this journey suggests a future where humans may not be forced to isolation among the stars. He paused, looking out his viewport at the distant stars. "The irony isn't lost on me. For 20 years, other species saw our solo ships as a sign of weakness or arrogance. They never understood we traveled alone to protect them. Now that they understand the danger we represent, they're helping us find ways to safely come together." Elsewhere in space, aboard a small transport, former Raider Captain Alan Fisher listened as Krell addressed a group of ship captains from various species. The Varaxian's voice was passionate as he described the effects of human pathogens and the near death of his crew. "I once saw human ships as easy prey," Krell concluded. "I learned they travel solo not from weakness, but from responsibility. They isolate themselves to protect us all." After the presentation, Alan approached Krell. "You've become quite the advocate," he said with a slight smile. Krell made the Varaxian gesture of respect. "I nearly died because of my ignorance. Now I can help prevent others from making the same mistake." Alan nodded. "And soon maybe human ships won't have to travel solo anymore." "That would be good," Krell replied. "The stars are cold enough without forced isolation." As word spread throughout the galaxy about the true reason for human ships traveling solo, attacks on Earth vessels dropped to almost zero. Raiders found other targets or other professions entirely. Some, like the crew of the Bloodfang, became educators and diplomats, and slowly human ships began to find companions among the stars.